You are listening to the Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family.
This is episode 223 of Horsemanship Radio, brought to you by HandsOnGloves.com, the all-in-one revolutionary bathing grooming gloves. Horsemanship Radio is a part of the family of the Horse Radio Network, and today we have a special format. It's kind of like new for 2023. This is Debbie Laux, and you're listening to the Horsemanship Radio. Thanks for joining us. Horsemanship Radio airs on the 1st and the 15th of the month. We're very reliable to that one, aren't we? And I'm excited today because we have the opportunity to listen to a story that affects generations of horses.
Well, before we get to our first guest, we always have a little chat about Hands on Gloves because they are our title sponsor after all. And you had mentioned something a little earlier about a mare you had there at the farm that could benefit from some new techniques with the hands-on gloves.
Yes, I loved it. We were talking about hands-on gloves being so clever. There's so many different things about them that we love. But the one thing this poor mare is always suffering from are the little drips off the belly when we wash her. And she's such a sweetheart. She really puts up with a lot. But for her, you can just tell it's like super ticklish, like there was flies all over her belly. And it's not, it's just a little water drops, you know. But even after you scrape her off, you know how the water creeps down under there and it drips a few more times. It drives her bananas. And you told me about a video that showed a guy who had thrown a towel over his dog in this case. But, you know, before you put it back in the car, you get out a towel. But for those who, you know, want to really be able to grip the towel and really get a good job done of drying the dog or the horse in this case. And I could really reach under her belly by putting on my hands-on gloves, grabbing the towel, and, you know, I don't have to hold it very hard if I can scrub under her tummy with that towel and get those last little bits of moisture out of there so it doesn't bother her.
We've all taken the towel and we dry some part of the horse with the towel. Mm-hmm. Well, the towel dries the top of the hair. Right. It does, especially as their hair gets a little heavier in the wintertime.
Yeah, here we are.
It doesn't get down. And it's like trying to wash your hand without using your hair, without using your fingertips. It doesn't work.
Exactly, Jen. That's a perfect analogy because I can't get in there, especially under the belly. You know, it's kind of loose skin and yeah,
that's
perfect.
Brilliant. So washing your horse, give them a quick scrape, and you've already got your hands-on glove on anyway because you're using that to scrub your horse.
Yep.
We'll just grab the towel in your hand. Give the tummy a rub, give the legs, and what a great way to also get the legs and fetlocks and coronets really, really dry because that's going to ward off scratches.
Yes, that's another thing that we can get here in the tall grasses. And she is a pasture horse, but she's absolutely lovely. And she loves her spa days and loves her grooming, but she hates her little drip drops.
There we go.
For tummy.
Yet another. We're going to have to develop a pamphlet, 101 useful ways that you can use your.
I'm telling you, every time you get horse girls together and you talk about hands-on gloves, we come up with a new one almost every time.
Every time. And you can find out more at HandsOnGloves.com or you can find them at your local retailer.
Dr. Steve Grubbs is originally from the state of Tennessee, the volunteer state. He's a veterinarian and a diplomat at the College of Veterinary Internal Medicine, Large Animals, and after 11 years of private and referral practice, returned to graduate school and obtained a PhD in comparative and experimental medicine with an emphasis in virology and immunology. Well, welcome, Dr. Steve Grubbs. I'll call you Steve. We've been chatting about some pretty serious stuff, but you're a fun guy, and it's really fun to have you here. I appreciate you being on Horsemanship Radio. Where do you hail from right now?
Right now, I pretty much in the center of the country. I live about an hour north of Kansas City, Missouri. Originally, I'm from the state of Tennessee, but I've been here 18 years, for a while.
Yeah, I looked you up, and it was November of 2003, so you're about 19 years.
Okay.
There you go.
Yes. Yes.
It keeps going. Yeah. And you're with Boehringer Ingelheim. I hope I'm saying that somewhat correctly for you German fans. But with the animal health division, and you're the equine technical manager, as we introduced you. But you're also a bit of a horsey guy, because you end up on a lot of equine technical stuff. What's your horsey background?
Okay. Gosh, we could talk, I guess we could talk forever, but I guess, a couple of the things. Yeah. I mean, kind of raised into it to a point, raised in with quarter horses, that sort of thing, brood mares, did some quarter horse showing, and then I got a little older and still working out. Always, didn't always want to be a veterinarian, I think, but it kind of hit me at one time. And prior to that, I actually worked for Anheuser-Busch with the Budweiser Clydesdales for a short period. A couple different places here, and actually where you are in California.
No kidding.
That was a while ago. That was a while ago, and I'm not sure those hitches are even there anymore. Maybe they are. I haven't kept up with them in a while. But,
that's a cool fun fact, though. Yeah, so you like the big horses.
Yeah,
the big horses are yours.
It was no, not necessarily. I've owned some, but probably not as much. But I really, it was really a good experience. I really enjoyed, working with those horses, understanding, because Anheuser-Busch has a plan. And there is the Anheuser-Busch way to take care of, to manage those horses, to take care of those horses. And that's what you do. And it's really a good way. And so that was really enjoyable. I learned a lot, just during that period of time.
I don't even know.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I don't even know how one person actually handles all those harnesses. It's amazing amount of weight. I don't think
they are, especially the collars. Because they're solid and they have all the brass, and they're a one-piece collar. A lot of collars you use in horses or mules now. You put them over and they don't. But these horses have to stick their head through. And I'm not a real tall person, and those are really tall horses.
Yes.
And but they learn. They know when you're short. Right? They'll come up, and I had to hold the harness. I had to hold the collars a different way. I was taught that, and because they are really heavy, and they will lower their head and help you. So sweet. They help. Yeah. Oh, they help you a lot. They taught me a lot there in the early goings. And so, yeah, they're fun.
They are fun. And you've hung in there with them. That's just so great. So you stayed in the horse industry, but we're going to talk about some more serious stuff here. I saw where your company, and probably you had a great deal to do with it, are investing in those researchers out there that are working on equine infectious respiratory diseases and some things about, I think you're trying to get some people to find out more about that equine asthma. And I have a lot of friends and horse owners and people that we know in the industry who they're worried about this equine infectious respiratory diseases and asthma. Maybe the first question that Jennifer and I were talking, my producer and I were talking, and maybe the first question to answer is, what's the difference between the diseases and the asthma? Or is there? I hope so.
Well, yeah. In general, okay, because a lot of things, in biology is in general, there's, kind of what we think about. But we talk about, there's obviously the viral infections, there's the bacterial infections and that sort of thing. And we think of equine infectious, disease there. Whereas when we're talking about equine asthma syndrome, because it is a syndrome, asthma itself is typically non-infectious. Okay. And where we have in the infection, they're infectious. Like I said, we have the viruses and the bacteria, but non-infectious disease is typically not related to that. Occasionally you'll see some of the clinical signs after that, but let's keep it simple. And the non-infectious diseases are usually triggered by something in the horse's environment. Okay. And what that is, it's usually the primary source is usually dust from either hay or bedding or somewhere in that environment. Okay. And so now you kind of separate those and think about how to either prevent, manage, or a little bit different, if that makes sense.
Okay. So you're telling me a little bit that some of the ways that we can some of the contributors. The largest contributors would be bedding and hay and the dust particles in those. Does that lead to both equine infectious diseases too, or are we leaning towards the asthma part?
We're really leaning toward the asthma part, okay, from the true environment, from the dust itself, because so non-infectious, our primary source is something from the environment.
So can we say that might be preventable, and how can I do that? I don't want my horse to have asthma, and if I've got a dusty barn, what can I do?
Okay, yeah, and I think that is exactly the first way to think about this. Okay, how can I manage this? Because we all want. It's the most. I want to say this. It's probably the most. It's not difficult, but it seems at times maybe overwhelming. But it's really not, because every environment is obviously different. Every part of the country is going to be a little bit different, from the East Coast to the West Coast and everywhere in between. Each environment is somewhat different. Now, by managing those, that is the very first thing we need to do, because a lot of times what we want to do is, okay, should we be treating these horses with a certain drug or a certain medication? And yes, that can come, but we really need to look at our environment, because without some management, and sometimes it's minimal, sometimes our drugs may not work as well or as long as we want, and we'll get reoccurring problems in these non-infectious, these asthma horses. And so what we like to do is what can we do to decrease dust? And some of the simple things, the simplest, if it's possible, and it's not always possible, if you have a horse that stays, in a stall, maybe it has a run out, has a run, it can kind of come and go in, or you have a small pasture. Some of the easiest things that you can do if a horse is having a small episode is turn the horse out in the pasture, right? Because most of the dust is going to be, he or she, the horse, is going to be exposed to is actually in the barn. Yeah. And then, we talk about feeding hay. We're still going to be feeding hay inside or outside. And a lot of times we'll feed hay where, above in these particular horses. Now we're talking about asthma horses. I'm not talking about for every horse, because it does not affect every horse. And so a lot of times, one, for convenience, and two, to keep the hay off the ground and kind of out of sometimes the mess, we'll feed them in hay racks or bags or whatever hanging up. Well, a lot of that dust is now, where is it coming to? On that affected horse, right down, and it's inhaling. We call those inhalable particles. And so they'll be inhaling that right at head level. So one of the things in an affected horse is we'll feed hay on the ground, right? And to ground them, on the stall. It sounds kind of bad, but for those horses, you will decrease the particles that they're inhaling. And there's a lot of work out there, sometimes 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 times, you'll decrease those particles. Other things, round bells, and sometimes it's necessary. And so there are some things in the environment we may or may not be able to change.
Sure.
But round bells, sometimes we can wrap those. We can even get huge hay bags that tend to slow it down. That may, because first thing a horse a lot of times wants to do, where's the best part of the hay? And a round belt's right in the center. And if you've looked at many pictures, I've seen horses' heads, and all you could see is the ears sticking out where they've eaten out the venom, their whole head. And so they're inhaling everything. Yeah, right,
that's
in that
true.
bag.
They drilled a hole in there, didn't they?
Exactly. And I mean, you'll see pictures, and people kind of think it's funny. And some horses it may not affect, but if you've got an asthmatic horse, not a good place for the horse to be sticking its head in. And so, round bells, if there's a way to get away from those, that's probably always the best. And like I said, we talked about the hay nets. And then you talk about the barn itself, depending on how the barn is made. If hay is stacked above the stalls, and as we continually, move up there, there's always dust settling down in on the stalls. As we're cleaning barns, if there is a way to turn the horse out, just simple things, turn the horse out while we're cleaning the barns, just if we're using like a leaf blower to blow out the dust and things, don't do that while the horses are in there, because it really, really stirs it up. Wintertime is a thing where a lot of places we have a lot of doors closed, we have a lot of windows closed. If and where possible, open, ventilate, and even before, if you have to sweep and you don't use a leaf blower, sometimes you can just, maybe not when it's below freezing, but you can wet down the areas, just dampen it a little bit to where you can sweep, and it really keeps the dust down. And
That's a good idea.
A lot of times it's little things we think about, for dust, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and in bedding, there's so many different ways depending on the part of the country. Yeah. Do you want to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's exactly right. And so, straw is probably not one of the things that's recommended really for bedding for these horses. Now, you'll have horses that are not asthmatic, that are not prone to being asthmatic, and you'll be fine with it, right? But we're talking about the horse that coughs excessively, that has those clinical signs, or has been diagnosed with asthma. Always a low dust. And, what is that? And some of those aren't really, I'm going to say inexpensive, because sometimes it's chalk. We talk about chalk paper. You talk about, chopped up cardboard. Wood shavings are better. Just no walnuts, wood shavings. Okay. Yeah. No, that's a no-no in horses at all. So I wanted to make sure we said that.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I agree. What about these new mattings that, they're like equivalent of 6 inches of shavings or whatever, for those?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think, anything that we can do, regardless of the material, that is lower in dust and something we can clean around, because, the environment is always, for these horses, kind of the trigger. And sometimes the trigger will be a little, dust is not the only, but that's one of the bigger ones. We're what we've kind of summarized there or talked about just a little bit is barn associated. Depending on the part of the country you live, there's a pasture associated, for asthma horses, and they'll be out. And the easiest thing for those horses, if you can, is, like we said earlier, barn associated, you let them outside. For the pasture associated, get them off the pasture.
Yeah.
Get them away from the trigger. It's simpler, but you still have to take that horse and put it into a low dust environment. That makes sense.
It does.
Kind of some of the little things. And, some of these aren't always that easy to do, but they're not that difficult. It's just little things thinking about that. It's the little things that tend to add up to something really big that can really make a big difference.
Yeah, for our horses too. Yeah, their noses are put in the wrong place, frankly. They should be in their ears, I think. It's hard to feed them so close to that nose and keep the dust away, I understand. But we do like them eating from, a more prone nose closer to the ground if possible. And, I remember growing up, the mangers were often quite high, and, horses were arcing their necks to get up in there. I'm like, that's not what we got into, did I know? So you are, dealing with horses and what we can do. These are great tips for that too. I love the philosophy of your company and yourself too. There was a statement that I read in your writings that said, "We acknowledge that the health and well-being of animals is pivotal to the success and development of human life." Can you tell me about that? That's very cool.
Yeah. Full disclosure, I didn't write.
Okay, you don't get credit.
Statement.
Okay, all right.
No. I won't take credit for something I didn't do, but I didn't. But, because I'll be honest, when I look at that, and to me, and I thought about it the very first time, because I think that, to me, that statement, when you read it, means something different to every person, or someone else can have. And for like me, I've got a bit of a, personally to me, something like that, it's obviously equine. You could take this to cattle, and then you could also, take this, to our pet, to dogs and cats.
And cats,
think, yeah, absolutely. Or, whatever. But, personally to me, I look at that and I think, well, I'll just tell you something else. My son, is autistic. Okay. And, but, he's a junior in college doing well, and, just right on. So, I mean, blessed in that way. But when he was first diagnosed, and of course, I already knew about this because I had seen some of these, all this, there's a lot of equine therapy, for autism or autism spectrum, or even, different behaviors or whatever.
Yeah.
You think about these horses, how the therapy, and he really gravitated toward that. Now we have a farm and but I could see where animals made such a big difference in his life growing up, because he just, for whatever reason, innately just gravitated toward them and was very, very comfortable. And to be honest, I was kind of shocked. He had a bit of a horse sense or a cow sense or a dog sense, however you want to talk about it, just about him as a youngster. And I was the way he moved, the things he did. But I think that behavior, you could just see a calming. So, I mean, to me, it's, I think all throughout his life, has been part of it. And I think that with him has even helped him, because, if he maybe get upset for something, then he was calm, always calm around animals. And so I think just personally, I look at that statement and I always think of that. And there's obviously other reasons how pets. And then to me, I think, as a veterinarian and even as at BI, the things we're trying to do is promote the health of those horses so they can do that kind of work. Obviously, you've got performance horses and everything else that everything horses do, but they're able to fulfill that, and hats off to all the people that really take the time to, work with those therapy horses and, with those folks that utilize those. And so, that's kind of our goal, is regardless of whether, how these horses are utilized or what, that, we're trying to do the right things to understand the right things about this to either prevent or manage whatever conditions these, horses have. So we can kind of keep doing that. That makes sense.
It makes beautiful sense. That's fantastic. Well, I support you. We all do. Boehringer Ingelheim, family-owned, which is really cool, animal health
Correct.
company.
Yep.
Here you are, you're granting money. This is where I read in a press release about you granting money to try to choose those that really want to center on equine diseases and asthma syndromes. And I love that you and yourself, Dr. Grubbs, and also your company is leading the equine research in so many ways. And you can provide, I know that if people will go on your websites, you can provide additional educational resources. I know about equine health and the research that's going into it, and generally just horse health, which is what our horse owners are interested in. So I hope people will go to that.
Yeah, probably that, since you just mentioned it, if we're just looking like right at the research awards now, and that will take you, then you can go anywhere you want. Now, the research awards are not new. We've been doing that for, I don't know, since 2010. Yeah, it's long for this particular program for a while. And a lot of different topics. We've not only looking at respiratory, infectious respiratory disease and equine asthma syndrome, but sometimes we will narrow it down to specific viruses. And we have a third-party review board that are from different universities, from private practice, and that helps, that reviews these and looks at these. And they're not, there's to support research, and also at universities to help support what we call a house officer, maybe a resident, okay? Because money sometimes is tough to come by for research. And so, we're trying to help folks. I was a resident once, and so not easy. So you have to look for a lot of places. And so, we're trying to help that along.
Nice.
And sometimes it's maybe not respiratory. Maybe it's just equine infectious disease, or maybe a particular virus. And we use our review board to help us, right? Pick topics that maybe aren't as funded as much in other places.
Mm-hmm. Well, we need more good vets like you, Dr. Grubbs. I'm so happy that you're committed to this high ideal. And we're really honored that you would be on our show today, and love to have you back.
Love to do it. I've enjoyed this.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Monty Roberts, and I'm dedicated to training horses without pain. You can learn to do it too on my Equus Online University. Western, English, the beginner, or the advanced rider. It doesn't matter. You can connect with other students online, too, on our forum, and there's a new lesson every week. It's a lifetime of learning for you on my Equus Online University at montyroberts.com.
Today, I want to start a little different format with you. Monty Roberts is going to be telling us a little bit about a famous horse that he was able to train, who was not so famous when he first met him. His name is Lomitas. He had won 2 races when Monty had met him, but he showed a lot of potential. They were very important races. The reason Lomitas has come up today is because we recently had a beautiful visit with a man by the name of Peter Schiergen. Monty's going to talk to you a little bit about Peter, and you can also Google him. He's not only a famous jockey, won some amazing races in his career, but he's also a now famous trainer. Multiple trainers of the year, 7 times at this point. But he has a fond, affectionate spot in his heart for this same horse, Lomitas, which is how Monty and Peter Schiergen's life intersected. The important part for Peter is the horse Danedream, a filly, became one of the most important horses in his career. Had Lomitas not been in the lineage of Danedream, which he wouldn't have been if Monty hadn't been able to get him to the races, Danedream would have never been. But there are a lot of horses in that category, like Silvano and others that you'll hear in this interview with Monty, talking about Peter Schiergen, his family, and the horses in his life. In 2004, Monty wrote a book called The Horses in My Life, and in it is a chapter titled Lomitas and the German Dynasty. When he wrote that book, he had no idea how deep that dynasty would become. At the publishing of that book, Lomitas's offspring had won nearly $8 million. That amount, it has doubled, tripled, and even quadrupled for the Lomitas legacy. On October 1, in a Grand Prix race at the L'Arc de Triomphe in France, in Longchamp, there was a filly, Danedream, who beat the boys and will be forever in the history books as winning by one of the longest margins in the history of the race. Her story could be an interview in itself. I would have loved to had Peter speak into the microphone too. His German is better than his English, and our English is better than our German. So we left it for Monty to tell the story, and here it is.
So I want to tell you a story about an incredible horse and about the circumstances surrounding this incredible horse that are quite unusual in the racing world. The horse's name is Lomitas, and he was owned by a very wealthy family in Germany, Jacobs, if we read it in English. Walter Jacobs, Vater Jacobs, owned a horse called Lomitas. He had a farm, and that farm was in Bremen, Germany, near Bremen, Germany. And it had 30, 40 brood mares, and he was doing quite well. His trainers, and he had 2 of them, one was in the south of Germany and one in the north of Germany, and they trained traditionally. I'm not going to sit here and criticize them for the things that they did, but they did different than I did. And there were the typical circumstances of training right around the world at that time. Pretty much everybody doing about the same thing. And all of a sudden, in 1991, right after meeting the Queen and being told that I must go around the world helping horses as much as possible and helping people to help horses in the absence of violence. So I get this call. And they said, we have a horse here. His name is Lomitas. He was the champion 2-year-old with 2 races. But they were 2 of the biggest races in Germany for 2-year-olds. So he was the champion 2-year-old. Then he spent the winter, let's say, growing up and being trained in a traditional fashion. I'm not going to criticize the trainers. They were doing what all the trainers were doing at that point in time. I'm not going to criticize the riders because they were doing what riders do at that point in time. And they had never heard of this cowboy from California called Monty Roberts, and they'd never heard of the things that he does without violence until he met the Queen, Queen Elizabeth II, and then Vacha Jacobs, Walter Jacobs, the owner of Lomitas, read some articles and saw things on TV, I guess, about this California cowboy that was training in the absence of violence and getting horses to do things that other people couldn't get them to do. So I got a call. And the call was from a trainer that had Lomitas in his barn. And he had an assistant trainer called Simon Stokes. And Simon Stokes could speak English, which was a big help to me because I didn't speak any Deutsch or German language. So they flew me over from here. I think they named a number that they were going to pay me to go, and I couldn't refuse to go because it was too much. But he would not go in the starting stalls. And when they did the things that they did, he would try to kill the people. Very, very aggressive. And at one race, he ended up lying on the turf while they ran the race right past him with 3 men in the hospital and a whole team of people beat up by this horse that wouldn't go in the stalls. And not only that, but there were horses in the stalls injured because they were in there fussing and fighting while they tried to get him into the stalls. And remember, he was owned by a multimillionaire that they had to try, and he was a board member of all the racing associations, and they had to try to get his horse in the race. So I was led to the stable of this horse, and I remember it so clearly. They rolled the door back, and I saw the most beautiful thoroughbred you could ever imagine, standing at the back of the stall and looking at me like I had two heads. He had a wonderful young German lady groom that loved him and got along with him, and he loved her. But when he went to the race, he didn't love anybody, and he wanted to kill everybody. So I met him, and I thought, wow, confirmation, 9.9. I mean, nothing is perfect, but he was a 9.9. And his attitude was okay in the stall. I went in and I gave him a rub. He kind of looked at me with surprise, but the young lady that was handling him could handle him without any problem. I said, what's the big deal here? And they gave him to me while they went out with a set of horses. And I took him to a little area that was a covered trotting ring for horses while they had bad weather in Bremen, Germany, a lot of the year. And so they would trot in this ring to give the horses exercise, and it had a roof over it. And I went in there, and I closed the gate behind us, and we were in this laneway about 12 feet wide. And I started to work with him, and suddenly he seemed to realize that I was working with him to get him to do certain things, stop and back up and turn left and right and stuff. And all of a sudden, he said, no. You don't tell me what to do. If you start telling me what to do, I'm going to hurt you. And I remember that he backed up against the wall about 12 feet from me, and I'm against the other wall across this little laneway. And I said to myself, and I don't talk to myself, but I said to myself, Monty Roberts, you better get your work right, because you're in the presence of greatness. Now, what did I know about greatness. Okay, so he won 2 races as a 2-year-old. That's the end of his story. Greatness? I saw his shoulder. I saw his hips. I saw him move. I saw him think. I saw him make decisions about what I could and couldn't do. And I considered him to be something great. And you better get your work right. So I went to work. And the first thing I was going to do is get him to load on a truck, because loading on a truck has some similarities to going into a starting stall. I mean, you have to put your feet in funny places, and you have to climb this ramp and go through a narrow door into a darker place and like that. And the trainer simply said, you can't get him to go in a truck, so I'm not going to get a truck for you. And I said, I came here to train this horse, and I want you to do, please, what's reasonable. Get me a truck. He just rode off on his horse and went with another set. And Simon Stokes obliged me by calling on his phone and getting a truck sent to the racetrack there where they were training at Bremen Racecourse. And the truck pulled in, and the trainer rode by and said, "You'll never get him to go in there." Okay. And they went out, and they were out there on the track with a set of horses for about 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes. And they're riding back, and he's walking in the truck. And the guy stops. So I remember that the name of the trainer was Andreas Wühler. And Andreas Wühler wasn't a bad guy. He just was traditional in every way that you could call tradition, the training of horses on a racetrack. And I was just bringing Lomitas off the truck when he yelled at me, "Don't bring him off. Don't bring him off. You will never put him back on. You can't take him off. You can't put him back on. We have to knock him out with drugs every time we put him on." And I said, "Please, just move your horse there. I'm coming out." And I let him out. And I turned around and walked him back in. And Andreas Wühler said, "Oh my God, what did you give him?" I said, "I didn't give him anything." And I mean, it had been 20 minutes. And I could walk him in and out. Then we took him to a place where I thought they had a round pen. They said they had a round pen. And when we got there, they said, "No, you make a round pen with the jumps." So I made a round pen with the jumps, nearly 6 feet high. And he made one round in my round pen and jumped out. And I said, "Look at this. He can do anything, this horse." And he was running in this big, show ring, jumping ring. And I said, "Take down the round pen jumps and just put them in the corner." And I did join up in this large arena with him. Those were days when I could jog a little bit and get around better. But he did a fantastic join up out there, and he was with me, walking, following me. And these guys that had been with him, their mouths just were dropping open. They couldn't believe what he was doing. This horse was so intelligent that he could read me and what I intended to do with him better than any human being could. They couldn't believe it, what they were seeing. So then we went back to the track, and the next day I was putting him in the stalls, in the starting stalls, that they couldn't get him in. Then they said, "It's only because there's an audience out there, and the conditions of the races are there with other racehorses and stuff, and everybody with the silks on, then he won't go in." Oh, but he would go in when you were home? Well, not really, but he would go in better at home. Well, yeah, when you're in an exciting place with all these things going on and strange people running here and there. Anyway, soon we had a race, and it was right there at the same race course where he lived. And I recall so clearly that I said to Simon Stokes, "I don't want any twitches on him. They put a twitch on him to go to the saddling paddock, a chain over the gums of his mouth, and all sorts of things. A whip behind him, whip beside him on each side. 3 guys with whips would take him to the saddling paddock, where he would fight them just to get the saddle on. And I said, I don't want any of that stuff. Leave the whips home, take the chain off his gums, and I do not want any pain to come to him, and his lady will lead him over. She was scared to death. She started crying. She said, he'll kill me. And I said, no, then I'll lead him over. So I led him over to the saddling paddock. I led him into the stall, which we had not practiced at all. I stood him on a long line, and they saddled him without any problem. And then I had the lady, the young lady that was his groom, walk him around the walking ring. She had never done that before. They had 3 or 4 people on chains in his mouth before. And I just had a normal lead on him, and I had her walk him around, and he did fine. And then we went out on the track, and he warmed up okay, just like a normal racehorse would. And they started to line up down about 300 or 400 yards from the gate, and all the jockeys start to line up and walk down toward the gate because they're instructed to by the director out there on the track. Now it's time for the race. So here they come down, and when they get down near the gate, I put a lead on him like you would normally do. Nothing in his mouth or gums or anything, just a normal lead on him. And I look over, and all the jockeys are riding over to one end of the gate there and getting off their horses. And the trainers are there with the horses, and the trainers are holding the horses, and the jockeys are standing there in some sort of a conference. And I said to Simon Stokes, who was there with me, because both the trainer, Andreas Wöhler, and Stokes were there, because this was the last race before the Derby in Germany. And it was terribly important. So they were there. And I said, what's going on over there? I couldn't understand a word they were saying in Deutsch. But Simon, remember, he was born in England, and he could speak English perfectly. And he could speak good enough German so that he could tell me, they've boycotted the race. You got permission to put him in last. And they said they wouldn't go in the gate and allow him to be loaded last because they'd been there before, and they had so much trouble while they fought this horse out behind, and the horses inside were getting hurt, and jockeys were getting hurt, and they weren't going to do it. And I couldn't blame them. And I said to Stokes, I'm just going to lead him in. No. Wöhler doesn't want you to lead him in. And I just kept walking. And I let him in and stood in there with him. I stood in front of him in the stall. And he was fine. I rubbed his head and told him how nice he was. And the director of racing told the other jockeys, you get on now, and you get. And so they did, boy. And in 2 minutes, the rest of them were in the gate and ready to go. And he won the race. Now, not only did he win the race, but he became Horse of the Year in Germany and became a sire. And this brought out a lot of bad people. And they started to send through demands from Mr. Jacobs that they get money from him, or else Lomitas is going to die. So I got another call. I had to go over and try to identify what's going on and maybe take him somewhere else. And when I got there, I told them who was doing it. And the reason I told them who was doing it was that the trainer next door to them on the track was very friendly with me when I was first there, training the horse and the things I just described to you. And now that I went back, he wouldn't say a word to me, just rode by and looked the other way. I said, that's the guy that did this. And it turned out that it was the guy that did this. But he had a whole team of guys after him because they had taken money on bets, and they owed the gambling people money, and they needed the money that they could get for advising Mr. Jacobs that they were going to poison him. And they sent him off to another race, which he won, but they poisoned him there. And he almost died, but he lived through it. And we took him to England and then to the United States, and he won at Santa Anita in the United States after spending time in England before shipping to the United States. He won at Santa Anita, and then his feet just went wrong from the poison that they had given him. And we had to send him back to Germany to be a sire. And he was a sire. And I bought a mare here to send over with him, and Mr. Jacobs paid me and bought the mare from me to breed to him. And that first breeding produced Silvano, who became Horse of the Year globally and won the biggest race in Hong Kong. He won all over Germany, became Horse of the Year in Germany, and 6 times the leading sire of Germany. And that mare produced 4 stakes winners from Lomitas, who became a champion sire after being a champion racehorse. Now, my entire time with Lomitas prior to his retirement, my entire time with him during his racing career was probably less than 6 or 8 hours. And yet my principles of nonviolence were carried on by Simon Stokes, whom I will never forget how cooperative he was. He was a traditional trainer when I met him. You can bet on that. He was very traditional when I met him. But he will tell you he has not whipped a horse since he met me. He has not been in any way violent with a horse since he met me. And Lomitas, Silvano, and the mare's name was Spirit of Eagles. And she will go down in history as the best broodmare that Germany ever had. Can you imagine that? Those 3 horses and another couple that they sold for $2 and $3 million will go down in history as the number 1 family that Europe has ever produced, with a matter of a few hours of convincing people to take the violence out of the training of this particular horse. My wife, Pat, is a sculptress, and she did a sculpture of Lomitas. And one of Lomitas's first riders was a young man called Peter Schiergen. And Peter Schiergen has been an advocate of my methods now for all of these 25 years. He's been an advocate of my work, and he's raised his children as advocates of my work. And he has 2 sons that are champion jockeys, one of which he sent me recently, Vincenz Schiergen, who was with the Godolphin Group, and he was with me 1 month, and it's changed his life. He's in Australia now, and he will never be the same as he was going to be if he'd have stayed in the traditional world. Champion jockey, and his older brother is a champion jockey, now retired, and is an executive with Coca-Cola Company. Peter Schiergen was here with his wife Gisela and a younger son that I had never met before. In fact, the 2 jockeys that they produced, Vincenz and Dennis, I babysat with them while I was there working for Lomitas. And they became like stepsons or something, close to me, almost family members. And Peter and Gisela have been good friends ever since. And I tell you that Simon Stokes is one of the best horsemen in the world today. I did go back for 26 years and spend a month organizing all of the youngsters to go where they were going to go to race and the conditions of racing. And they've produced 52 champions in those 26 years. That's an average of 2 champions per year. I don't believe that's ever been done by any organization before, including Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, who has the largest operation in the world. I don't think that he's produced 2 champions per year for 26 years. Certainly not percentage-wise. He has hundreds of horses racing, while in fact the Jacobs family had 12 or 14 horses per year racing, and 2 of them winning championships in any given year. It's absolutely incredible. And really, you know, it doesn't speak to me to be some genius or something. Don't lay me accolade. I don't deserve it. I am an observer. The horses taught me. They were my teachers. And they said, you know, help us and let us do our thing. Show us what you want, but don't be violent with us. If you are, it will be less effective and I won't feel like winning races for you. It should be noted that Lomitas, while he was champion sire many, many times, his peak actually was with a mare called Danedream that won Group 1 races in 4 or 5 different countries and was ultimately sold for a huge amount of money and went to Japan to be a broodmare there. Danedream was actually one of the greatest racing mares Europe ever produced by Lomitas, this wonderful horse that cooperated with me. It should be known that Peter Schiergen was a jockey on Lomitas during the most difficult times. And then he retired from riding in races and became a trainer. And he just visited us here in California. It was fantastic. His family, the youngest son, whom I didn't know particularly, I might have known him as an infant, but I didn't know him particularly, was with them. And his wife, Gisela, was with them. And they've remained that kind of friend. But let it be known that Peter put in a starting stall like I invented, where you train horses to go in a kind of a circle, like hallway system, I call it. And he has one on his place now. And he was here learning from me about the come-along halter and things like that. And he has been 7 times the leading trainer of Germany since I met him in 1991. A fantastic, not young man now, young by my standards, but he's in his early 60s or late 50s. And Peter Schiergen will long time be the leading jockey of Germany. 7 championships is not even anybody close to that. So that's a very famous family. That's a wonderful family. And they have done for racing what so many people have been trying to do. And they did it through the nonviolent techniques that I brought to Germany in 1991. It's one of the pride-making parts of my life that very few people even know about. And Peter Schiergen is not the kind of guy that goes around bragging about what he does or telling everybody where he learned it or anything like that. He's not an outgoing sort of celebrity type at all. But he's a wonderful man that has done a fantastic job, and 7 times the leading trainer of Germany. Many times leading jockey too, but 7 times leading trainer, which is far more difficult to do than the jockey thing.
Whisper the language of the herd. Listen, you don't have to say a word.
It's time for Jamie Jennings to fetch an email from Monty Roberts' inbox and share a morsel of Monty's wisdom in a little segment we like to call Ask Monty.
Leave this world a better place than mine. The magic in the language of the herd.
Dear Monty, we are buying a horse trailer with living quarters, and we're wondering if you could comment on the pros and cons of mangers. Monty's answer. It is important to take into consideration the purpose for which you are acquiring a trailer. Obviously, if you're a professional traveling 1,000 miles a week or so and basically living on the road, then you and your horses have an entirely different set of requirements from the horseman who travels to the occasional trail ride or short distances to horse shows. There is nothing wrong with mangers. My assumption in formulating this answer is that we are discussing slant haul trailers. If you decide to include mangers, then it's best to choose a trailer with wider stalls. If you choose to put mangers in a narrower trailer and you have full-size horses, you could restrict their space unacceptably. For the hard-traveling professionals, mangers provide several advantages. They make it easier for you to feed and water your horses while on the move, and in addition, they allow for significantly more storage space than trailers without mangers, as most trailers will utilize the space below the manger for extra storage. I'm a spokesman for several types of trailers on a global basis, and many companies produce a manger that is safe and effective. Be very careful to use only mangers that are built from extremely strong material and constructed so that they have no areas that could injure a horse's leg. All edges should be smooth and all flat portions should be reinforced so that your horse cannot tear the metal. Many injuries occur when time and use is weak in the metal and cracks occur. Cracking in metal can be like a knife to the flesh of your horse. The feed compartment of a manger need not be more than 5 or 6 inches in depth and should have an outward sloping lip and rise to your horse closest. This construction will allow the horse to pull his foot out of the manger if he is silly enough to get it in there. You are probably aware that I am a strong proponent of slant haul trailers. If you have read my textbook, you will be aware that I recommend partial partition. I have also stated that I am a strong proponent of ramps as opposed to step-up trailers. Some of my companies produce trailers in accordance with my specifications.
For more of these insights into good horsemanship, go to www.montyroberts.com and click on the orange banner that says Get Free Horse Tips.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Yeah.
Where in the world is Monty Roberts?
Monty is looking forward to meeting some new friends, 2-legged and 4-legged, in February of 2023. We have a mountain trail play day on February 4. We have a gentling wild horse course, 5 days, on February 6 through 10. We have an introductory course of horsemanship, February 13 through 25. And we have our introductory course broken into modules or taken as a 2-week course. You can go February 13 to 15, which is the intro course module 1, and that's the foundational steps to Monty's methods. Then you could do February 16 to 18, which is the course 2, module course 2, which is the join up section. You get to learn the iconic join up with lots of wonderful horses here. And then February 20 through 22 is the introductory course module 3, and that is long lining. It's the next step after join up to condition your horse to turning left and right and backing up. It's really fun. And then if you've taken all 3 of those and are ready, you can do February 23 through 25 as the introductory course module 4, which is preparation for the intro exams because you're moving on to certification. I love that. And then in March, we have March 11, Horsemanship 101. Super fun. And that one is super popular. So get in there right away if you're looking for a 1-day fun trip. Solvang, California, Central California. We're dry here, by the way. I mean, we've had rain, but we're not washed away. We're actually functioning really well. And that's again, March 11th, Horsemanship 101. Then March 13th through 17th, we have Monty's special training. And that is way fun. That's all week with Monty working with the horses in an extended fashion, not just in one demonstration. He gets to work with the horse all week and put a lot of new tricks in that horse, and a lot of wonderful relationships are made on those Monty special trainings. And then March 18th, we have a Mountain Trail Play Day. Didn't explain that when I said that in February 4. Mountain Trail Play Day is we put in a Mark Boehringer obstacle course, and it's competitive and it's really fun. And so we don't want to hoard it, and the boarders get to use it. But one day a month, people can come and trailer in and try it out for themselves. It's a lot of fun, and the locals have been having a lot of fun coming to us once a month. And then in April, we have, April 1st, it's really true though, we have a Mountain Trail Play Day that day as well. And then April 10 through 14 is the introductory exams that we talked about. So if you're ready, you'll come. And then April 17 through 25, the ones that can get into the advanced exams, you know who you already are, and you're planning to come April 17 through 25. We look forward to meeting you there. You can see more at montyroberts.com. Check out his calendar or call the friendly people at 805-688-6288. And for today's details about our show, go to horsemanshipradio.com. You can find links and photos and more information about our guests. And we love your feedback. So you got to follow us on Facebook or Twitter or maybe Instagram, and that would be facebook.com/Monty Roberts. Twitter, we follow along at /Monty_Roberts. And Instagram, my favorite because it's beautiful, is at Instagram.com/Monty_Roberts/. That's a lot. Jen usually reads this stuff. This is hard to do. Many thanks to our sponsors, too. And that is HandsOnGloves.com. Love them. And MontyRobertsUniversity.com. That is our reason for being. Be sure to visit all the other great shows on the Horse Radio Network, too, at www.horseradionetwork.com. And until next time, have many happy horse hours.